Forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March. For the fans who love the crunch of the pads. Prefer a dunk. And expect nothing but the best. This was the Big Ten. Now this is Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Deace.
And greetings. Welcome to this week's episode of Bigger Ten. Steve Deace here with my co-host, never partner, Aaron McIntyre. As we head further into October, we are approaching the halfway point of the college football season. College basketball practice is well underway. Big Ten College Hoops Media Days were last week. So, Aaron, we are in the thick of things right now. We've got one of the biggest weekends of the college football season across the country in terms of headline matchups. So we're going to get a little bit of separation of some of these teams coming up this week. You ready to go?
Yep. This Saturday was the date everybody had circled, or one of the dates, but probably the primary date everybody had circled on their calendar in the preseason. And so far, no disappointments across the board. And this is not just in the Big Ten, but across the college football landscape. Major weekend coming up.
By the way, I'm heading over to Kinnick. First game I've attended over there in about a decade. My uncle is a lifelong Hawkeye fan, and him and I have been close since I was a little dude. And
cool.
I'm getting older. He's getting much older. So who knows how many more chances we have to do this. So we're going over to the game at Kinnick. I'm taking him. I'm gonna do something I've never done before. I'm going to give him, all of his kids are daughters, and I'm going to give him the full father-son experience. So I'm actually going to wear something Hawkeye to the game.
Wow.
All right. That's never happened before. I'm going to do that.
So screwed now.
But I got to tell you, I was pumped when I saw the game was going to be at 11 a.m. though.
Yeah.
Because that meant I was going to get back home in time for all of these other big matchups around the country and get a chance to see them. So.
Yeah.
All right. Are you ready to go?
Are you sitting in the stands?
We are sitting in the stands.
Okay, where are you sitting?
You
probably don't want to say exactly where you're going to be sitting.
I may not want to tell you. Yeah.
I'll just
good
say
seats. We're sitting in the stands.
I'll just say I loved sitting in the north end zone a few weeks ago versus Troy. It was the all 22 view every single play. Really good seats. And unlike the rest of the stadium, it is sloped at such an angle where you can just stay sitting down the whole time. Even if everybody around you is standing up, you can just stay sitting down the whole time. Really enjoyed that.
See, for me as a football junkie, I would have picked that had I thought about it. For him, I tried to get him about the best seats that I could, to give him the true fan experience. Yep. But you're right. I'm a little jealous of you now. That would have been great to have that all 22 the whole time. All right, let's get to the Big Five on Bigger Ten. And, maybe the greatest name for a sports podcast ever. It doesn't exist anymore. But it was in the early days of podcasting, Bill Connolly, who does analytics at ESPN, and Bud Elliott, now of 24/7 Sports, they had a podcast, Aaron. I don't know if you know this or not. They ended up changing the name to Podcast Ain't Played Nobody, because they got sick and tired of how many comments came all year. I mean, we'd be in November. They haven't played anybody. Okay. I mean, that is a familiar refrain of college football fans across the country. Every year, no one's played anybody, right? I mean, hell, last year we were in the national championship game, having already beaten Ohio State and Alabama, and people are sending me comments on Michigan podcast. Look at your non-conference schedule. I mean, what? Or what are we even doing here? Okay. So, I know they've played nobody. I know that Ohio State has played nobody, and we're going to see them. Well, Iowa is respectable, so that's not fair. But before that, they had played nobody, and we're going to see them play a definite somebody this weekend, one of the biggest games of the year. Number 2 Ohio State at number 3 Oregon. But I got to tell you, I got a pretty bird's eye view a year ago of what it looks like week after week early in the year when you're not playing teams that can match up with you, but you are making them look like they're junior varsity. Mm-hmm. I saw that with my Michigan Wolverines, and I kind of feel like I'm watching that with those Ohio State Buckeyes. And we're going to learn a lot more this Saturday night, right? Okay, but it does look like they are playing a different sport than every other team in the Big Ten is. Or am I exaggerating? What do you think?
No, texting with some of my friends during the game, some of my Hawkeye friends during the game, it's like Iowa in that first half, even on both sides of the ball, which for the offense means one thing and for the defense means something else. I thought they played their guts out, and it was still just the eye test was apparent. I mean, the Ohio State is just really, really good. And it's not just they bought a bunch of players. That's true. It's a $20 million roster, something like that. You can tell when players are coached well and when they're not. And it's a really, really talented team across the board that's really apparent that it's coached really, really well. And I wasn't even mad. I really wasn't. They were just that good after the game. So, hats off to them. They did get tested in that first half, and they responded. And, even the 3 turnovers from Cade McNamara, you could get picky about one of them, but those are ones that the defense forced. They were forced turnovers, on all 3 accounts by the pass rush. So hats off to Ohio State. They are playing at a completely different level than anybody nationally that I've seen so far this year. So they are just that good, I'm convinced. And it's not just because they beat up Iowa. Just getting to see them and study them and see them take as much of a punch as Iowa could throw at them in that first half and then just walk all over them. Really, in the run and pass game, they just look really good.
I mean, you've got a freshman out there in Jeremiah Smith just mossing what is
I wasn't even mad
perennially one of the best secondaries in college football.
And I wasn't even mad.
I think Emeka Ibuka just scored again.
Yeah, I wasn't even mad about that Jeremiah Smith one hit. I mean, he just went up there. He was huffing and puffing before the play because he was running all over the place. He was huffing and puffing before that play, went up there, mossed a guy. I'm like, tip the cap.
Yeah, what do you
That's
do?
just an incredible play. Incredible player.
Again, we're going to learn a lot more this weekend at Oregon. That's one of the tougher stadium venues in the country, but it does so far halfway into the year look like they're playing a different sport than everybody else. Now, they still have to dethrone the 3-time defending conference champions. And you want to talk about, this is not as talented as the Michigan team of a year ago, which put so many guys in the NFL, but this is still a team that in the latest Pro Football Focus mock draft has 4 of its top 11 picks in the NFL draft from the Michigan Wolverines. So this does not look like a talented team that is very well coached right now. They're already on their 3rd quarterback, and it's a guy who's done nothing in 7 years of college football other than get injured. They're like 115th in the country right now in pass defense, and they're like 119th in scoring offense. The Wolverines have already given up more touchdown passes and committed more quarterback turnovers than they did in 15 games last year. And we're only 6 games into this year. So, I mean, M stands for mess right now in Ann Arbor, but I had plenty to say about this on the Channel on Michigan podcast yesterday. So I'll turn it over to you now.
Yeah, not really a whole lot to add. I think if I'm in Michigan or Michigan fans' shoes, I am in the camp of, even hate to say this, I wouldn't even give Sharon Moore the rest of this season necessarily. You want to be at the front of the pecking order when it comes to college coaches and hiring a new coach, especially, if you drop a couple more that maybe you should, at least on paper, you line up well against the other team. Mm-hmm. He gave you a lot of memories last year. I don't think he's cut out for this job. And to not see it during the offseason or certainly last season, Brendan Sullivan in Iowa, we'll talk about him a little later on and Would You Rather. But Brendan Sullivan in Iowa, he was basically just brought in during the spring as, hey, we just want to have another warm body here just to make sure, somebody who's shown he can do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Just bringing in somebody at the quarterback position who has played college football. They didn't do that, and now they're paying the price. And I thought during the game, the move to Tuttle was, it looked pretty good. But like you said, once they figured out how to play him, figured out that, we got to actually play a real defense now. It was just a mess of a game for Michigan. So I think you're firmly in got to move on time because you can. So one of the questions I think I asked on Bigger Ten during the offseason is, the big test for Sharon Moore. It's one thing when you come in for, what was it, quarter or half of the season, thereabouts, and you're kind of in spot duty, but you really know you're not the guy who's calling the shots overall. You're not the CEO of the program. You're just kind of a role player for a few games, and that's impressive in and of itself. But when you are the CEO of the program, how are you going to be able to handle that massive weight? And so far, the answer is not well.
All right, let's get to topic 3. And just as a precursor to topic 3, Big Ten teams from the West Coast traveling east and from the East Coast traveling west so far, Aaron, are 1-8.
Yep.
1-8. Okay. USC is responsible for 2 of those 8 losses. They've now lost on the road to both Michigan and Minnesota. They now host Penn State. So now Penn State's going to try to buck this trend by traveling all the way to the other side of the coast as well. But 1-8 so far for the teams that are making the transcontinental trips, either east or west in the Big Ten. But USC hosting Penn State this weekend at the LA Coliseum, kind of a desperation must-win scenario for the Trojans. At least with Michigan, we can say only one of their losses was in the league, right? That's probably fool's gold. But if you want to try to sell that to your players, you can. Hey, we're still in the league chase. We only lost 1 league game. USC cannot have a 3rd league loss before we get to the middle of October, right? Then you're asking yourself, what are we selling our teams? What are our team on right now? On the other hand, you have Penn State facing the specter of that cross-country travel that has not been kind to Big Ten teams here in year 1 of this bigger 10.
And you've got James Franklin out there this week complaining about the length of the runway at State College, right? Pennsylvania, or in Happy Valley there. And so he's po' boying it, playing that up, and he's not concerned about it. Or he's seen the 1-8 record and he's like, oh boy, this is going to be, we're going to take a 2-hour bus trip to Harrisburg and then hop on a transcontinental plane. That 1 win in that 1-8, that was Indiana boat racing UCLA. Another fascinating Indiana story, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. But this is absolutely desperation time for USC. I think you have the advantage of the travel, like we just talked about. I still think this is a much better team than the 0-2 record, on paper anyway. I know that's a cliche. I think that they get the job done this weekend. Put it in another way, the 2 Southern California teams both have home games this week, UCLA and USC. The spread is about the same for the visitors. Minnesota's about a 5-point favorite. Penn State's about a 5.5-point favorite. Now, I know we're talking about different teams here, but that's kind of an odd, given Penn State's record coming in versus what we just saw from USC, that's kind of an odd line. You would think it'd be about a 10-point favorite on paper. So I think USC finds a way to get the job done this weekend because it is must win. Penn State really hasn't been tested. I think you can throw the West Virginia game halfway out. Just a weird way that game went down. West Virginia has kind of rallied, with the exception of the Pittsburgh game. I think they're a lot better team than they showed that day. Penn State has not been tested. Plus, they're going on 3 time zones away. I think USC finds a way to get it done.
All right. You mentioned Indiana. Let's go there next with topic number 4. Hoosiers. We just put them in here in this rundown now every week, Aaron. Just breaking glass ceilings and reversing fortunes and trends. You mentioned they're the only Big Ten team to win a transcontinental game so far. They're the first FBS team to obtain bowl eligibility. That's crazy. Stop and think about this. Indiana is bowl eligible and Alabama is not. Think about that.
Yep.
Are you prepared to talk to your children about the fact that Indiana is bowl eligible? Notre Dame and Georgia and Michigan are not. Are you prepared to have that conversation with your children? Because that is the world, that's the country we're now in. Not only that, they're only 2 wins away from tying the all-time school record for wins in a year. That was 8, right? Set in 1967, the last time they went to the Rose Bowl. So, I watched a lot of their game against Northwestern. And Northwestern found some things to expose defensively for sure that are going to be on tape moving forward with teams that have a lot better quarterbacks than Jason Lauch and more explosive playmakers than Northwestern does. But the thing is, you're going to need to score those points. They don't have Ohio State's talent, Aaron, but in terms of the level of efficiency that this offense operates at, you're going to have to get to 30 probably almost every week to beat them. They operate at a very high level of efficiency on that side of the football. So I thought Northwestern exposed some things defensively for sure with some time to prepare, and teams with more talent will probably exploit that, but they're going to have to, because you're going to have to score 27, 28 minimum, given how efficient of an offense they run. They're tough to stop.
Indeed, and I don't know what left there is to say about Indiana. We just want to see them probably now against some better competition, which is going to happen. They've got Nebraska on the schedule, Michigan, Ohio State on the schedule. That'll all come in due time. But again, I just want to repeat what I've said multiple times. This is not just fluky stuff from Indiana. Now, it was a ball game late third quarter, but they figured out a way to get it done. Again, that's a hallmark of a team that's coached very well. That's a hallmark of a team that's in its third or fourth season under the same head coach. And yeah, he brought a bunch of his guys from James Madison over, but I can't be more impressed, and you can't be better, really. You can't really be better than Indiana right now. I mean, you've got, like you said, your perfect record, bowl eligible, you're operating very high level on offense, and you've got some things to yell at the defense about as you head into your bye week. What more can you ask for? What more can you ask for? And this is just, I think what's going on at Indiana is the portrait of this landscape of college football. You hit on it a little bit in Michigan podcast, but you can actually build now. We speculated over this with Mel Tucker in Michigan State. You can, and Brett Bielema, his first season at Illinois. Can you get a jumping off point by basically rebuilding your roster through the transfer portal? Yes. Can you build that over time? And I think we came to the conclusion that no, you really can't. Well, Indiana is now showing that not only can you have a good, solid jumping off point, you can actually have a foundational year by completely nuking your program and starting from scratch if you get the right coach. And
yep. Can we talk for a second about who the right coach might be?
Yeah.
Someone who brings with them a cachet of players they already know, they've already recruited, and they've already evaluated.
Yes.
Okay. And that's never been possible before in any era of college football until now. Mm-hmm. But I mean, Kurt Cignetti bringing what was it, 2 dozen players with him from James Madison, who was undefeated for much of last year. So you've got built-in buy-in already,
a quarterback
that comes with that too. I mean, that if you've got someone who brings a ready-made roster or team of guys that have already bought into him, he's already evaluated that's kind of Cignetti's secret sauce here.
And that's a bit of a unicorn, and that starts and ends with the coach, because that's talent evaluation. That's one thing, and then you happen to have a roster full of guys at your old team that are still have eligibility to bring with them. So it's a bit of a unicorn, but he's showing that it's possible in this day and age. But I think we will get more into the realm of developing talent once you start paying players. That's going to be an off-season topic that we will talk about ad nauseum. But as it stands now, I think this is probably the zenith of what can happen in this Wild West of college football.
Finally, let's stay in that state. And we talked about Michigan being a talented team, but a mess of a team right now. I don't know what's worse than a mess. I mean, that is.
I can't remember
the performance.
I can't remember the last time I saw a Big Ten team that just looks as hapless and helpless. I mean, even Rutgers, as bad as they have been, Purdue has had some really bad teams. I mean, just from the eye test, Purdue just looks awful. I mean, seemingly every play, every series, defensively, you've got guys all over the place making business decisions. Again, I'm at a loss for words of how bad they look. Mm-hmm. I cannot remember a Big Ten team across the board that looks that bad. Wisconsin tried as best as they possibly could early on in that game to keep Purdue in that game, and Purdue just kept saying, "No, we don't want to be here." It's awful.
And this is the other side of the cautionary tale of the portal, because Purdue spent a ton on the portal. Now, but again, these aren't guys they knew, they evaluated on their own before and signed before. These were all new players. But I mean, this, when you go back to the Rutgers era before Schiano, when Chris Ash was the coach, and one year they had a quarterback who was their offense was so bad that their starting quarterback was 14th in the Big Ten in QBR, and there's only 12 teams. Yeah. Which means there were 2 backup quarterbacks that had better QBRs and had thrown enough passes to be eligible. But at least defensively, they were getting blown out, but defensively they were at least somewhat respectable most of those weekends. I mean, with what I saw, especially you're playing a struggling Wisconsin team. You're not losing to Ohio State or Michigan 52-6. You're losing a struggling Wisconsin team who's got its own identity issues. I mean, that was Denny Green, Francis P. era Northwestern bad. And you had Ryan Walters come out and talk about it too. The Illinois he used to be at Illinois, the Purdue coach. But I mean, I don't know where they go from there. I think you're probably heading towards Ryan Walters being a real nice defensive coordinator hire for somebody here pretty soon.
Correct. It's just, Rutgers, like you said, and I brought it up earlier as well. They have looked bad before, but there was some identity somewhere on that on those teams that you could point to and kind of hope to build off of. Across the board, they just look lost. Purdue does on both sides of the ball, just completely lost.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, let's play Would You Rather. All right, Aaron, let's play some Would You Rather. And I'm going to start here with you. And I think this question is especially pertinent since we came up with the topics for this week's show. The NCAA, after the fact, changed the transfer portal window so it's even shorter now. Now it's only 30 days. In this coming year, it's going to be even less than that. December 9th through the 28th is the transfer portal window in college football. So this goes right to the heart of this question. All right. So say Michigan ends up, and it could be in any year, a team like a Michigan or Penn State has a down year, goes to a middling, lower end bowl like the Motor City Bowl. Would you rather turn that down to focus exclusively on recruiting and the portal, because all of that prep and everything for this meaningless game would be going on right at the time you've got to be recruiting there too? Or take on the humiliation ritual of playing like the Motor City Bowl if you're a Michigan or that kind of program, because it also gives you 15 extra practices. On the other hand, though, you don't know how many of those players you're trying to develop in those 15 extra practices you're going to retain or want even to come back, right? So which of those, what would you rather do in that kind of scenario, which could be a very realistic scenario for Sharon Moore here in about a month?
You don't want to play Western Michigan in Detroit?
It's a tradition unlike any other, brother.
So my instinct was to say, just turn it down. If you're a team like Michigan, turn it down to focus on the transfer portal. Here's the thing, though. How many guys do you have on your roster right now? Over 100.
Mm-hmm.
What's coming next season? Roster caps.
Right.
You need to there's going to be some really hard conversations you're going to have with a lot of guys, and you want to make sure you've evaluated them as thoroughly as possible. So in that case, in this year in particular, if we're talking about next year, when you've already got the roster caps, I would say turn it down for sure. But this year in particular, you want to make sure you have your team as thoroughly evaluated from top to bottom as possible. Okay. So you know for sure the guys you're saying, sorry, it was a nice ride, get out of here. You want to make sure you've got the right guys and are cutting the wrong guys. Can't believe we're saying that now, but just this year in particular. For you, would you rather bet UCLA or USC to pull off a moderate upset this weekend? Both teams are in the +5 underdog range.
So this is a tease to our confidence picks, but I think I'm going to say UCLA. Even though one of my win total best bets for the year was UCLA under, and that's looking like that's pretty golden. But this is the classic.
Yeah, and they've looked better, more competitive, I should say, against teams I did not expect them to look competitive.
I agree.
Against.
They were way more competitive on the road against LSU and Penn State both than I expected them to be. I agree. So there's at least a baseline talent level there, but this is a classic handicap and play. Fade the team that just had the momentous win and then has to go on the road right after that. Okay. And what did we just say? 1-8 in crosstown travel games so far, or cross-country travel games so far for the Big Ten. I'm kind of hoping, this is why, it wasn't on the first batch of picks that I put out for this weekend on our Patreon on Monday, because my numbers are hoping that we're going to get a 6, that maybe we'll get some public money on Minnesota and get to that key number of 6. If we get to a 6 later this week, I'm playing UCLA. Okay, I think this is a classic letdown spot for Minnesota for sure. I'd rather play, and as much as I think USC is better than UCLA, They're at least going to play. I'm not sure. I don't know if I buy into the Andy Kotelnicki offense. They ambushed West Virginia with no film, and then we've seen them play 2 teams of the Pulse since in Illinois and UCLA, and it looked a lot like what we've seen from Penn State's offense in the past. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, but I do know this, man. That Penn State defense, bruh, is legit. Year in and year out, that's a top 10 unit, and you can win a lot of games just with that unit in and of itself if you're not beating yourself. So that's why I think I'd rather play UCLA there. All right, for you, would you rather stick with Cade McNamara at quarterback if you're Iowa, whose average QBR this season is just 34.4, or switch to Brendan Sullivan, whose QBR at Northwestern last season was 43.9? Now, let me add one caveat to this. Brendan Sullivan had a couple games who had a 90, 85 or better QBR. I mean, he was up and down, up and down, up and down. Okay. Cade McNamara is just pretty much just down here every week. Yeah. Just pretty much down. So Sullivan could be great one week, and then look like he's all Big Ten one week. And then how are you on scholarship the next? I can see knowing Kirk Ferentz as long as I have, man. He ain't Mr. high highs and low lows guy. At least give me he wants as many constants he can plan for as absolutely possible. All right. He is not a gamble on greatness guy. Just ask Brad Banks, redshirt in a year, okay, to watch Jags play quarterback and then almost win in the Heisman the next year, right? That is Kirk's MO. But if you were calling the shots, what would you do?
Yeah, if fan Aaron, this doesn't matter because it's not going to happen. I don't remember the last time Ferentz benched a quarterback in the middle of the season. That might have been 20 years ago, close to 20 years ago, maybe, if that's ever happened. I'm thinking Jake Christensen versus Stanzi.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Was that in the middle of the season? I can't ever remember.
Yep.
I would rather go with Sullivan just to see what he gives you. And plus, he's a little bit better running. I've seen McNamara a few times this year, and this is not what I'm accustomed to seeing with Petrus and Deacon Hill. Being statues in the pocket. I've seen him escape a few times, buy a little bit more time. So at least he brings that to the table. With Sullivan, though, he does have a little bit better wheels, something that the defense has to account for. Yeah, he had a big run against Ohio State's twos late in the game last week. I just want to see what he gives you. I just want to see it. That's all. I just want to see something from that position instead of nothing, which is what we've been getting. Finally, if you're a Purdue fan, would you rather fire Ryan Walters now or give him the rest of the year? I mean, you got recruits dropping like flies.
Yep. Yeah, they just lost their highest rated recruit already. I'm going to give him this week probably against Illinois, your former team. To see if there's any way, I mean, if you can't get your team after getting humiliated like that, and with them knowing that you're playing your former team the next week, if you can't get them up to fight for you in that situation, then that would probably tell me at that point all that I need to know. And at this juncture, you don't have to worry about guys hopping in the portal and losing your team in the middle of the year. So I think I would give it this week to see what kind of response I got from my players. We are talking about a very gifted young coach in terms of being a defensive coordinator, right? And and your first head coaching job is a Power 4 job. I want to make sure I probably have enough evidence to pull the plug now, but I want to make sure that I'm not making a premature mistake, right? So, Steve, what would one more game show me? It's not just any other game. I mean, this team was just humiliated, and you're playing your head coach's former team. So if those aren't things where you can get your guys up to at least put on a way more competitive effort than they did the last time, then that would kind of pretty much tell me he's lost the team and it's time to move on.
Yeah, that's it.
All right, we'll come back and let's get to our feedback of the week and our poll results here in a moment. This week's X-Poll results, we asked you which two-loss big brand team is in the most trouble the rest of the season. Michigan wins this one overwhelmingly over USC, who it looks like that's who you voted for, Aaron. Tell us why.
I don't even remember voting. I must have just clicked on USC to show the results.
Just see the results?
I don't even remember voting on this. It's Michigan just because of the quarterback situation alone.
Agreed.
You know what's the old? You know what the old saying is: when you got two quarterbacks, you've got zero quarterbacks. What happens when you've got three quarterbacks?
Right.
You don't have like anything. So I'm going with Michigan. It's. I thought they would just be able.
If Miller Moss played for Michigan right now, Michigan's minimum 5-1 and in the top 10.
Yep.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that answers your question right there. Yeah.
I just thought that they would be able to muck things up against Washington. They don't. It's weird. They got used to just playing bully ball all season last year, but it's pretty bully ball. They don't know how to play ugly bully ball, I don't think.
Right.
And so it's not really going the way that I thought it would.
Yeah, you're not alone. It'll be fascinating to see what Sharon comes with out of the bye week. This is in response, our feedback of the week, to what I posted on our Twitter account over the weekend. I think there's going to be Tennessee's already lost to somebody unranked. We've already got we have almost as many unranked teams beating top 10 teams already this year as we had in the memorable 2007 season, which set an all-time record. So in response to that, Aaron, I posted I think there's going to be multiple 3-loss teams in the 12-team playoff. MGM on X says, so the new saying is, if you lose, you're in.
Yeah.
Hey. I think people again are going to have. I know I keep harping on this, man, but it's a lot more like the NFL now, guys. You're in these huge conferences. You're playing these way more difficult schedules week to week, right? Nobody remembers that your Chiefs were 11-6 last year.
Nope.
No one remembers that. They lost 6 times. You know what everybody remembers? They got into the playoffs and won the Super Bowl. And I think nobody remembers who was the final AP ranked number 1 college basketball team. You remember who won the NCAA tournament. And I think that's what we're going to have to recalibrate and get used to is, and then there's going to be sometimes, that losing on the road to a top 10 team is better than winning on the road against, winning at home against an unranked team, no matter how dominant you were, because those things are going to get very subjective. So, I think people got to get used to that, brother.
Yeah. So this, again, will be kind of an off-season conversation, I'm sure. But, after the Iowa-Ohio State game, I wasn't really despondent, but I was just kind of resigned to the fact that Ohio State, there's always been a talent gap. Always, with 95% of Ohio State's opponents. And Iowa, if they're playing them, that's true. That's always been true. Always been true, always going to be true. The difference these days is that Ohio State can buy, and I'm not complaining here. I want this, any Bucknuts listening, this should be a compliment. Ohio State's able to buy $20 million worth of players, and that just puts you on a completely different plane where teams like Iowa, upper middle class teams, are just never going to be able to compete with you again. And, hats off to Ohio State. You're playing the game the way it is right now. That's the name of the game. You'd be stupid if you weren't, out there getting the best possible players you can. I was kind of resigned to that on Saturday. It's like, maybe if you get the right team, top 10 team at the right time on your schedule at home, maybe you can do something. But man, the middle class to lower class teams, they're just never going to pull off upsets again. And then they'll be rare
for sure.
No. And then the rest of the day happened on Saturday, and like half of the top 10 went down in flames, and number 8 probably should have lost as well. So it's a wacky world. I don't know what happens really to NIL collectives once they start paying players. Again, that's going to be
they'll stay around, and that what'll happen is they'll stay around, and the top 2 to 5% of schools, your ability to line up actual merchandising and branding deals, because those NIL things are going to be regulated now by a governing board out of this House settlement. Okay, so you can't just use them now as money funnelers, which is what you're doing now for pay for play. We're going to have pay for play. Okay, we're going to already have that, and every school is going to have a range of dollar amounts with a cap that they can spend. And some schools, like in Michigan, will go to the cap, and maybe other schools, like in Iowa, won't quite get there because that would mean they have to cut some sports. Okay, but everybody's going to be paying people substantial amounts of money. What the NIL collectives are going to do now is within your alumni base, base? Do you have the merchandising and branding deals, actual NIL?
Yeah.
That's what puts you over the top to get that star quarterback prospect. Like, for example, when a Dave Portnoy says, how about we just pay someone $3 million a year to promote Barstool Sports if they sign with Michigan as a quarterback? You see what I'm saying? That's what the NIL collectives will do moving forward. They will be used to procure the elite of the elite player, transfer, et cetera. But everybody's going to have somewhat talented rosters. Now, I think this is what's happening with how I cannot tell you how many proven professional handicappers I follow whose college football point spread picks going 2-3 seasons in a row now have been be substandard, not even like, barely above 500, but losing records. And it's because of the democratization of talent now. I mean, it's just so spread out now. There is so much more variance, and the public betting into these numbers creates more variance. It's really hard, really hard. Yeah.
So we're not what you're saying is it's not really going to be that much different once you start paying players.
To some degree, I do think it'll be different in that I don't think Georgia's going to have an entire second string of guys that would start at Iowa, for example. I don't think that'll be true anymore. Okay. I do think the top end of their first string guys on the roster will be superior because of their NIL collective to what you guys have. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. I still have, but go ahead.
But there's going to be a lot of guys that are going to decide, why do I, if they can pay me at Iowa, why am I waiting 2 years to play at Ohio State? There's going to be a lot of guys that decide that.
Yeah.
There are. It's going to be closer to college basketball. You're going to have your Dukes, you're going to have your North Carolinas, but those teams don't win it every year. Florida Atlantic gets to the Final Four.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be closer to that.
I still haven't heard whether or not what this does to transfer, the transfer portal. Like, are we going to be able to lock guys into 4 years at the same school, or you get one transfer?
It's going to be unlimited transfers, and now there's no letters of intent. And so that's the first step to a contract now. It's a straight up transaction. In exchange for your services, we pay you financial aid, and then next year it'll be a revenue share. All right. And then what'll happen from there is you'll have contracts. And maybe some schools will put guys on year-to-year deals, and other schools will try to put guys on multi-year deals, and you'll have to negotiate that. Yeah. Here we are.
Yeah, indeed.
I'm just glad my favorite team won it all the last year of this beloved sport as we've known it. It might get better. It might be better. People like Joel Klatt are convinced of it. I'm not necessarily. They might have ruined it. I don't know. I'm just glad I got to see my favorite team win it all the last year of the sport that we've always loved. Now we'll see what the future looks like. All right, if you, we'd like to see what you think we look like. So leave us a 5-star review, like, rate, subscribe, share, 5-star review. Please do all those things, whether it's on YouTube, iTunes, and elsewhere, because it helps us to find more Michigan fans, Big Ten fans, college football fans, Iowa fans, Penn State, Ohio State. The Big Ten's volleyball doubleheader is USC and Oregon and Washington and UCLA. Those fans too. All right, so help us here to keep Bigger Ten alive, and we appreciate all of you that do that as well. We appreciate all of you. You can also follow us in between episodes on X as well, at Bigger Ten. Until next week, I'm Steve Deace for Aaron McIntyre. We'll see you then.